I'm facing the other way today. See how that works out.
You little girl. You little girl. I know. I gotta do something else now. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Kelly.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good.
Hey, turn up your sound a little bit.
That's my speaker.
There you go. It may be fine. It may just be me, but I noticed last week you were pretty quiet too.
How's that?
Much better. Rat.
Okay. Oh, I forgot. I've got to go feed the dog. I'll be right back.
Okay. You reminded him to feed the dog.
Hey, girl. He was busy having his cocktails.
Oh, that is adorable. So cute.
He likes tequila. Okay.
What have you been up to?
Yeah, I'm not even sure. This funky summer weather, it's so hot, right?
Yeah, I love it, but like yesterday I had a weird day and I didn't do anything. I didn't get out of my pajamas. I just sat around all day and actually didn't do very much, which felt great. And then because I don't do that very often. And then today was really disjointed, but ended up it was a good day.
You took
But
a walk.
I think I'm definitely over the lack of structure. You know what I mean?
Do you have any word on school yet?
You know, it's back and forth constantly. So we got an alarming email from the head of the state union that said all full-time, like 12-month employees should apply for unemployment before September, like before school starts. Make sure you've applied. Like, oh, shoot, really? So Janine didn't act on that right away. And then 2 days later, the local rep said, oh, ignore that. Don't worry about it. Our recommendation is for us to start school. So, okay. Then, I mean, it's like every other day there's a recommendation. And, but I did, I was able to apply for a job, so that felt good.
In the school district?
Yeah, so strangely as an attendance secretary, so in the front office, not with the kids, but I was like, and it's a 12-month position. It's like, yep, I'll take it. So they're hiring, which is weird because they said they weren't hiring.
File for unemployment, but we're hiring. Okay.
I know. So nothing makes any sense.
How do we?
friend,
Do we want to try it on here?
Justin.
Hi.
Does this do a thing that stands? It does. Hey.
Hi.
That was a nice cleavage shot, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Does that work?
I'm thinking about changing the name of our group to Not Your Standard Bible Study.
I love that.
It's kind of
Well, you know, my mom asked, what's the difference between a queer Bible study and a normal Bible study?
we wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I know.
Any Bible study I come to is queer. So there you go. Like, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So I know we're waiting for, No, I think this is everybody. because Mike's camping.
Because it's a
And
fairly.
Alexis said she might join us, so I was hoping they would.
So it might be better. Okay. Well, I don't need it like right in front of me.
Okay.
If you want your hearing
Looking for the link. Hang on.
How about?
Sarah was looking for the link. Okay, it got quiet all of a sudden. They must have muted themselves. Okay, so we give Misha a minute to get in here. And I'm looking for the place in the Bible where the 10 Commandments are. One thinks one should know that. Oh, there's Misha.
There.
Isha.
Hey, Kelly.
Hey, Misha, you're getting a doctorate.
Don't remind me.
Quick quiz question. Where do I find the 10 Commandments?
I'm assuming it's in Exodus.
Yes, Exodus 20. Bing, bing, bing.
Where do you
Like-
find Exodus?
Old
Uh,
Testament near the front.
Old Testament. The old.
I mean-
Second book.
For me, it goes back to the song Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Like learning all of those, the Sunday school songs.
I never learned those songs, so I just have, the
yeah.
first 5 I always get right, and after that it's a little fuzzy,
Understandable.
right? Okay, so on that note, I suppose we could start, and somebody might be, this is funny. So, Rachel's coming in. So we actually have a pinned post in the group.
So for me, if I go to discussion, it doesn't show up at the top. I have to go to announcements.
Yeah, I
Really?
don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't find it.
You know, you
either.
mentioned that. I'm going to fix that right now. Hey, Rachel.
So where is it? Because I can never find it.
I'm doing
Me
it
neither.
right now. I'm posting it and pinning it and all the things.
Where?
I don't know. Hang on. In the group, not in the conversation.
Got it.
And I'm going to say pin to top. Groups act weird.
So you're gonna pin it to the top in the discussion section, or?
You know, it says mark as announcement, but then it goes to the announcement section. So,
I see it. Okay.
I see it in the discussion section. So
And I see it in the announcement section too now.
all right. Well, anyway,
everywhere.
every week I will try to do that. Sorry about that, guys.
That's all right.
Okay. Hi. How's everybody?
Good.
Okay, well, shall we dive in, or do we have things from last week that we need to talk about?
I don't think we had last week, did we?
A week before last. You're right, we didn't have last week. Sorry about that. Okay, so I will be quoting heavily and posting. I already posted a couple of things from this book because I'm a true believer. The author is N.T. Wright, and this is a commentary series on the Gospels. So there's 2 for Matthew, 1 for Luke, one for Mark and two for John. So if you're ever interested, they're fairly thin, easy to read, and written by an expert. The foremost Episcopal scholar in England. So there's that. Okay, all right. Okay, let's have a quick prayer and then let's dive in. All right, let's pray real quick. God, we just ask that your light would be with us tonight, that you would open our eyes and open our ears to what the Spirit is saying to the church. God, we ask that you would help us to rewrite old stories, help us to put new wine in new wineskins, and to put off the old wineskins of the instructions that we had in both unaffirming and overly traditional communities. We want to see a new thing, and we want to see a new thing in us. And we ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Okay, so if my poor memory serves, we didn't finish Mark chapter 2. Am I right? So I think we need to go to Mark chapter 2. Feel free to unmute yourselves. Mark chapter 2, verse 18. Oh no, we did Mark 18. We did Mark 2:18. We're going to do Mark 2:23. Mark chapter 2, verses 23 through 28. Right?
Yep, that's what I remember.
Okay. We had a good conversation 2 weeks ago about what it means to put new wine in new wineskins or old wineskins, and what it would mean to put a new piece of cloth sewn onto an old piece of cloth. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we bring that sort of ancient teaching forward into our lives? And what does that mean? Like for me, am I still trying to put this new wine of progressive Christianity into the old wineskin of the unaffirming, traditional, fundamentalist, evangelical teachings that I learned early on? Right? And how do we, as queer Christians coming from some of those kind of backgrounds, how do we filter out, how do we even recognize how much of culture there was in those churches, not just biblical teaching? Like how much of what we lived had nothing to do with the Bible or what the Bible has to say, but was just culture from those denominations. I would see that especially in I don't know how you say it. Certain denominations are much more recognizable because they're much more individualistic, like Pentecostalism and Catholicism. They are specific unto themselves, and they have very certain rules that apply only to themselves. And if you were raised in one of those kind of traditions, sometimes it's difficult to sort of tease out how much of what they teach is culture and how much of what they teach is like Bible. Like, does the Bible really say that? Does the Bible really teach that? One of my favorites is you have to have quiet time every day. You have to have your quiet time with God every day. And I used to ask the ladies' Bible study in the Church of the Nazarene, where does it say in the Bible that I should have 30 minutes of quiet time every morning? And their response was, oh, honestly, which is super not helpful and probably a trademark for it's our culture, shut up. It's just what we do, don't argue with it. Right? Okay, so this is Jesus now in a really interesting, let's flip it on its head kind of situation. Who would like to read Mark chapter 2, verse 23 through 28? Raise your little hand.
I can do it. Okay. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grass fields, and his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" He answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar, the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath."
And then there's another verse, 28. News about him
Oh.
spread swiftly throughout the entire region of Galilee. Okay, so let's
That's
put
not in my
ourselves,
Bible.
pardon
Yeah,
me,
what version do you have?
Not in my Bible.
28.
Mine doesn't say that.
So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath is what 28 is in my Bible.
Mine.
Okay, this is
Yeah.
a quote from the book. So let me go now look in my book. You know, did you know that different Bibles put the verses in different places? Those aren't original. You know, Mark didn't say, now I'm going to write Mark chapter 2, verse 10. Mark just wrote, and at some point, hundreds of years later, maybe thousands, somebody came back around and said, you know, it'd be easier to understand this stuff if we could number it. These are very arbitrary breakups here, sometimes in the middle of a
Next
thought.
chapter's different.
Your
The
chapter,
next chapter doesn't even say anything about that.
So even in this Bible, the inclusive Bible, my verse 28 says, that is why the chosen one is ruler even of the Sabbath. And it does not have this extra verse. So I wonder what Bible he's quoting. Interesting, huh? Let's see which version he's using. Huh. Okay. All right, well, let's break it down. Let's go through this little vignette here and see what you think. What do you see? What, get on the ground with Jesus there. What's going on? What's the first thing you notice?
Well, the first thing I notice is that they're not really walking on roads. If you've noticed, because they're walking through a grain field, which makes sense because there's paths through it, but they're cutting cross country. They're going wherever they want, not specifically sticking to a road.
Okay. So there they are, Jesus and the disciples. We don't know how many. It's not always just 12, FYI. And they're walking along and they're eating heads of grain. So they're like, have you ever driven out to Reardon or Davenport and you can drive within a few feet of the wheat fields and stop and just pick a head of wheat and crunch it? It's gorgeous. Right? Okay, so then it says, look here, the Pharisees said to him. Like, well, wait a minute, where'd the Pharisees come from? I thought this was just Jesus and his disciples.
They were hiding in the grain field.
Children of the corn. So Wright, the author, he says that based on what we've already seen in the little bit we've read in Mark, so 1 chapter and a half, Jesus has done and said some really outrageous things, and he's become a person of note. And so although the Pharisees were not like legally set apart to be judges, they were self-selected and sort of called themselves Pharisees. Wright likens it to if somebody steps up and starts running for president, pretty soon all the journalists are like following them and looking through their Facebook pages, trying to find any dirt they can find, any way to discredit them just because, you know, it's fun to discredit people. And Wright says that it was probably around kind of the same thing, that because Jesus was saying and doing things and had a following, he was now dangerous and needed to be looked into. And so it's not surprising that there were amongst his followers certain Pharisees checking to see what he was doing all the time so they could report back. So that's what they're doing there. And then Jesus says, haven't you read what David did? What David? Who David? David who? Who's he talking about?
King David.
King David. King David, you know, the one who unified the tribes of Israel for the first time ever, their king, their ancestral ruler, the guy who makes them Jews, almost a little bit less than Moses, but not much, right? So did Jesus just liken himself to David? Put himself on the same plane? Like, here, let me give you an example. I'm just doing what King David did. I'm like a king. And when he and his men got hungry, so me and my guys, we're just like King David and his guys. We're the same. And David, you know, he went into the temple, which was forbidden, even though David, you know, whatever built it. And he ate the bread of the presence, which was the bread that was consecrated and then put on the altar and like set aside, basically like for the Holy Spirit to eat. Sort of like the Catholic thing, Sarah, where they have bread always like in the altar.
Well, I guess it's in the sacristy or something, but girls can't be altar servers when I was a kid, so I never got to know about that.
Yeah, okay. But that's, you know, do you guys know, like when you go into a Catholic church, you're supposed to genuflect before you enter the pew? So like you walk up, like you walk into the main aisle, and as soon as you're ready to like duck into your pew, you genuflect and then you step into your pew. And when you get out of your pew, you do the same thing. Do you know about that? No? Okay, Google it. The president does it on West Wing all the time. So the president, you can look at the TV show West Wing and find any scene where he's in church and he's doing that thing. You just kind of do a quick like knee dip thing. And the reason you do that is because there's consecrated bread in the sacristy. Mm-hmm. And it's literally for Catholics, the body of Christ itself. And so you have to show reverence to the body at all times. You never turn your back on it. So when you go to the front of a Catholic church, you fold your hands and you walk solemnly. And then when you take the thing, then you walk off to the side, and then on the side altars, then you can turn your back and walk back to your pew. But you don't walk up to the front and then just turn your back and walk away. That's rude. So this is what David ate, the consecrated bread. Same idea. The holy thing on the altar that should always be treated with honor. And David and his men got hungry and they went in the temple, and it was the only thing there to eat, so they ate it. It was breaking all the rules.
Question. This is before David was king, right?
From what I remember, this is actually when he was running from Saul.
Yeah.
And he was trying to kill him.
Been chosen. Thank you for pointing that out. He's been chosen, but not acknowledged to be king yet. And N.T. Wright pulls that out because he said that's exactly what Jesus is at this point. Jesus has been chosen by virtue of the Holy Spirit landing on him in his baptism and saying, "This is my beloved son with whom I am well pleased." And yet the world has not yet recognized his kingship, his authority. Thank you. So Jesus is really lining these things up for people. This is heresy. And Wright says that these are implicit ways in which Jesus is saying, I'm it, I'm the king, I'm the Messiah. We don't get it because we're not Jewish and we don't recognize all these references. So I appreciate it when the author and Rachel and things pull these things out for us, because we have to get our heads in that space in order to understand how radical Jesus was. Okay? So Jesus goes on, he starts talking about the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for humans, not humans for the Sabbath. So which is more important, the humans or the Sabbath? We are. The answer is us. Just, if you're ever asked any question in Bible, if the answer is not Jesus, the other question is us. The answer is, we're the most important thing, okay? Not the law. So the Sabbath was made for our benefit. And Jesus is, again, pointing that out, like, you guys are missing the point. That we're not here to serve the Sabbath. Our job as humans on earth is not to fulfill all the laws for the sake of the law. There's reasons behind the law, right? There's a reason for the Sabbath. So Jesus says, Humans were not made for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is master even of the Sabbath. So here again, implicitly, not explicitly, but implicitly, Jesus is saying, I'm the Son of Man, I'm the Messiah, and I'm the master of the Sabbath. I'll say what goes. So how do you think that fell on the ears of the folks whose job it was to make sure everybody kept the rules?
Probably not good. Did not land well.
Right?
Because even though you might be able to follow the logic of it, it's not going to make sense because the outcome is going to be against what they're believing, what they're standing for.
Right. Right. Somebody give me an example in a church or denomination that you've worshiped in where there was a similar rule, like Sabbath keeping. Maybe it was Sabbath keeping. And how did that rule play out in the life of that congregation?
I have a story. So I used to teach Bible study for Foursquare in college. And something that was actually really good that we cared about was making sure that Sunday school was actually safe for children, that we were actually doing our due diligence to make sure that no sexual abuse was happening. But also we were also not officially mandatory responders, but we were kind of mandatory responders in cases where we thought abuse might be happening in the home. But that what that turned into was we had to get a background check, but then we also had to sign this lifestyle document to maintain that we were safe for kids to be around. But what ended up happening was they're like, oh, we can just list literally anything that maybe doesn't even pertain to this child's safety, but that we don't feel is representative of a Bible study teacher. So there were a bunch of just really arbitrary stuff that it's
don't smoke.
Don't smoke, no marijuana, even though it's legal in the state of Washington. You can't be living with someone that you're dating. I think there was some stuff about remarriage after divorce, and definitely, but also the wording that they used was also very vague for a lot of things. So if they decided, oh, do you know what? We really like her and we know she has a good heart, so we'll let that slide. But then if they're no, I don't like you, they could just be well, see, you're violating this. So I was able to weasel my way in because I'm well, it says no active homosexuality, and I'm single, so I don't see any problem with this.
You're not really homosexual if you're single.
No, practicing homosexuality.
I'm totally different. I would say I've mastered it, but
Well, you do know the Bible says nothing about women.
Yeah.
There's one verse taken out of context.
Yep.
We're good.
Yep.
You guys,
You're good.
we're fine.
Well, that's because sex between women isn't really sex.
It's not really
No,
sex.
it's
So
There's no penetrator.
Just saying. Yeah. Okay, so no smoking. Right, Kelly? Hang in there, babe. So no smoking, right? In my former denomination, no playing cards, no gambling of any kind. So no pull tickets, no scratch cards, no nothing. Keep the Sabbath. And again, that's really generic. They could decide what they meant by whether or not they thought what you were doing was breaking the Sabbath. So if you went out to lunch for no good reason on a Sunday, it was breaking the Sabbath. But if your grandmother was in town and it was her birthday and it was the only possible day you could possibly go out and celebrate your grandmother, well, okay. That we could understand.
Dan, did you have no dancing?
Yes. Oh, no dancing. Nazarenes are the famous no dancers. Yep. So anybody else got any others? Those pretty much usually cover it.
I will say something about that. What actually ended up happening was people just lied.
Yes, absolutely.
Like I knew 2 other Sunday school teachers who were actively having sex with their boyfriends.
Yep. Yeah, you're just asking people to lie. Absolutely. How about hair? Anybody else get told to grow their hair besides me? Yep. Guys get told to cut their hair. Yeah.
Clothing.
Right? Too much jewelry?
Well, the first church I was at, women couldn't wear pants. You had to be wearing a dress or a skirt that was far enough down below the knee, and it wasn't even like the fingertips, it was way below that.
What is with the women's knees? Can I just say that at some point, some guy just really
Someone had a very weird fetish for knees,
somebody,
and I'm not kink shaming, but I'm like, you really ruined it for a lot of people.
a lot of people. Trust me, my knees are not that good looking. They're really not causing anybody to sin, my knees. Really not. So, I mean, we can look back and laugh, but I know some of you, because I know your stories, some of you have gotten treated pretty badly by some of these rules. And it gets way beyond unfunny to abusive, right?
So Jen, obviously you know from my Facebook that like maybe it's been like 2 months now, but I used to go to Foursquare Summit on South Hill, and I fell in love with the church. Like there was like a live band, I knew a bunch of people, and then and I did Alpha, if you guys are familiar with Alpha, and fell in love with it. My table, we all became friends. We wanted to like keep going together afterwards. So nobody wanted to volunteer to lead, so I volunteered to lead, and then I had to go through the application process. And it was this huge ordeal. I was not, they wouldn't let me lead because of my open homosexual lifestyle. And what she said was, it's because I'm so public about being gay on my Facebook. And if it weren't for that, then, and I was even like, I haven't had sex in a hot minute. Like I'm not in active, like whatever. And then it just didn't work, which is fine. Then I found you guys.
Yeah, and again, like, we're not making light of them, and that was an extremely painful process for you to go through, because as we know, our spirituality and our emotional lives are generally bound up together. And when you get treated like that by the people that you've worshiped with and prayed for and had them pray for you, and you've been through, some of life's painful times, and these people have been there for you. They're close like family. They should be a good church, right? And then you get treated like that. Like being gay is all that Dustin is. Clearly not.
Yeah, it sucks.
Totally sucks, right? So here comes Jesus into the people of his day, and he's like, I'll decide what a rule is. I mean, all of the church leaders that we have just described, all of them are the Pharisees in this story. Now, I'm not saying all of those people are Pharisaical at all times. I'm not judging all of them. But they fit this story. They're just waiting for somebody to break the rule. And then they go, oh, rule breaker, not welcome. Right? And Jesus is calling himself the Lord of the Sabbath. I mean, he doesn't use that terminology, but that's what he's saying. Like, I'm in charge of what is considered Sabbath. I'll decide from now on. Thank you very much. I mean, I can't think who could come along in American modern society and what they could say that would equate to this religiously. I don't know. Right? So, but we know that when modern evangelical pastors publicly change their minds on homosexuality, it reverbs like this reverbed for Jesus. They get kicked out of their churches. They have to start new churches under this black cloud. They are publicly discredited. Any Christian worship artist that comes out as gay is immediately banned from all Christian radio stations. This is the same kind of behavior over and over and over, right? So I posted some questions on the Facebook page that Wright brings out for us to think about. And one of them, we're gonna keep going because the next little bit here is about Sabbath too. So I want us to read through the 6th verse in Mark 3.
I have one observation.
Oh yeah.
So if the Pharisees are watching this happen, they have to be following along, right? Aren't you not supposed to walk a certain distance on the Sabbath?
The walking a certain distance, well, there's two things. I mean, yeah, those rules about Sabbath have changed over the centuries, so I can't speak to what the rule was in those days. I know you couldn't walk after nightfall on the Sabbath, right? But the rule about walking a mile, that was a Roman thing.
There's a different.
Yeah.
From what I remember, you can't be walking for work. And that's where like it was very much subjective, but it was like you can't be like hauling something, you can't be doing something of that manner, you can't be carrying something. So you can still walk, you just have to make sure you're not like exerting yourself.
Okay. Good though. Okay, so let's read Mark 3, 1 through 6. Who would like to read?
I'll do it.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus.
Okay, so Jesus again goes into the synagogue where everybody's worshiping. And there's a man there and he has a withered hand. All right. Again, it's interesting that you guys don't have the verse that Wright puts in about news about him spread swiftly. So, but clearly people have heard about this guy, and every time he enters a town, or in this case, a synagogue, more people like push in just to see what's going to happen. Like they're all, something's going to happen. This guy does stuff, right? So, but they're not just they're not just interested in what might happen. They're trying to frame a charge against him. Like, they're paying close attention. Like, what's he going to say and what's he going to do that we can actually use to not just discredit him, but get him thrown in jail? So, yeah. Then he asks this question. Great question. Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath or to do evil? So what if they had answered? What are their choices in answering this question? Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath? Well, doesn't the obvious answer seem yes? But it's not lawful to heal on the Sabbath. So they can't say yes, right? Is it lawful to do evil on the Sabbath? Well, it's not lawful to do anything on the Sabbath, and it's never lawful to do evil. So they can't pick that one. It's a great question, right? So, and I have to point out, because it's me, and if you've met me for more than, a minute and a half, I'm a person of some heated passions. I got your basic Irish temper going right here. And I like that it says that Jesus was deeply upset at their hard-heartedness and looked around them angrily. Like, I grew up with namby-pamby Jesus. I grew up with Jesus who never gets mad. And Jesus was just peaceful and nice, and he always had that really sweet smile on his face. But as I got older and I started reading for myself what the Gospels have to say, that wasn't who I learned about. I learned about a Jesus who got upset at people's hard-heartedness and had justice issues. So then he looks around at everybody's mad, and he says to the guy, okay, put your hand out. So all the man does is this, and it's healed. Has Jesus done anything? Could the crowd pin the healing of the man's hand on Jesus? He didn't make magic mud this time. He didn't spit on it. He didn't wash it with anything. It just all of a sudden it's just better. Right?
Well, yeah, but that's the way Jesus has worked. He didn't really, he's just, it's a miracle. So, I mean, people don't just become healed unless Jesus is in the room. So yes, they can blame Jesus.
Right, that's as close as it could come. Now, there are other times we're going to read about where Jesus uses means of healing, water, mud, touching. But in this particular case, he didn't even say your sins are forgiven or be healed. He just said, stretch out your hand. So yeah, they could say, well, Jesus said, stretch out your hand and it was healed. So it was Jesus. He healed on the Sabbath. But they're stretching, you know. So,
And then they would have to admit that Jesus had the power to heal.
right? So then there's this interesting line. The Pharisees went out right away and began to plot with the Herodians against Jesus, trying to find a way to, in this translation, destroy him or bring him down, right? Or kill him. I don't know what your translation says. The Herodians are followers of Herod. So Herod is the current ruler in Judea. So I Googled the Herodians, and I'm going to try to do that share screen fancy thing that, you know, I've done before. So let's see if I can do it. Share. Hi, are you there? Let's see if I can
We can see
find
you.
the thing. Oh, there they are. There's the Herodians. You can Wikipedia them. Okay. This is the, have I got all of you?
Mhm.
This is the family tree of the Herodians. So this guy at the top, you can read in Luke 1 and 2 and Matthew 2. This is the Herod who killed the little children when Jesus was born. Okay? This Herod here, Antipas, this is the current Herod that we're talking about that put John the Baptist in jail. Okay? And so this is the current tetrarch, means he's ruler of 1/4 of Judea. And then this guy comes up in Acts. So every Acts reference, except for one in chapter 4 and one in chapter 13, are referring to this Herod Agrippa the first. And then this is the second Herod Agrippa the second, which is Acts 25 and 26. Okay, lots of Herods. Gets super confusing. I had a picture of one of them, but it's gone now. Anyway, you can Google. So I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, you're back. Look at that. The magic. So the Herodians are a group of Jews. They're Greek Jews who want to be independent of Rome. They want to rule themselves, and they want the ruler to come from the Herodian line. Okay, so like politically, they're Herod's folks. Religiously, they're Jews, and they're like Greek-speaking Jews. The Pharisees were not friends with the Herodians because the Pharisees, by virtue of their religious nature, religious beliefs, wanted Jewish independence from Rome, but they wanted King David's line to rule as it used to back in the good old days. So here we have an interesting little note that the Pharisees, who have no power in Roman ruled Judea, running their little selves over to the Herodians, who by virtue of their political beliefs have some elbow rubbing power with the current political figure, Herod. so they can bring down Jesus. So is it just me, or is this stuff going on now? Where religious folks are aligning themselves with different political factions in order to get their religious wants and needs taken care of. So, and going against their own beliefs to do it. Is it just me, or is that happening now?
It's pretty much, you see that all over right now. So it's not just you, and maybe it's me and you.
I mean, the churches that we described earlier, the very fundamentalist, conservative denominations that a lot of us come from, I was absolutely shocked that they supported a person who had been not once divorced, not twice divorced, but 3 times divorced. Since when does the fundamentalist church think that's okay? And yet, they just absolutely have pitched that belief system aside. I'm confused, you know, I mean, we were all confused in 2016. There were a lot of us that were like, no, he's not going to get elected. This is not going to happen. Franklin Graham is never going to support that person, ever. It's not going to happen. Not Franklin Graham. What?
It happened.
Why?
Power.
White supremacy.
The man
see.
has 2 tails. What can I say?
The man has 2 tails. He speaks with forked tongue. I mean, it's at least somewhat, makes me feel somewhat better to know that we're not new at this horrible stuff, that we've been doing these kind of things for, you know, centuries and millennia now.
Watching this, like, sort of like moral decline of the Pharisees, like, as like reading through the chapter, not as like a selected story, is small concessions, and then it just sort of becomes a vendetta. And it reminds me of like how easy it is to be like, I'm right and this is my mission and this person does not represent my mission, but then your mission stops being like human well-being and it becomes attacking and destroying that person.
Right, for the sake of some rule.
Because sometimes it's like, oh, well, now we don't even like, now the rules are just like whatever. Now it is completely about my vendetta against this person. Yeah. I don't need to follow my rules because I'm right and I have to prove that I'm right.
Sure.
And I had to end like a relationship with some people where I thought that we had like a common goal, and then it just sort of became about fulfilling this vendetta.
Yeah.
And it's really easy. It's so easy to get sucked into.
So easy. Anybody else? Okay, quick, we're going to do a quick review. So everybody try to find Exodus chapter 20. It's the second book of the Bible, way near the front, but all of those books are fat, so, you know, go that way some.
It helps that I have Zoom on one screen and the Bible on the other, so I'm just like, oh, click, click, done.
Did I tell you about the time I was in church up on the dais on my little pastor chair, and I was doing this on my phone, and one of my snarky friends in the pew texted me and said, "Get off your phone." And I said, "I'm reading the Bible. What are you doing?"
I don't know who that was.
It wasn't you, strangely enough.
Was it?
Not that time, probably another time.
Okay.
I think it happened a lot more than once, but yes.
What verse?
Okay, you got 20? Everybody, Exodus 20, yes, show of hands. All right. Who wants to read? Somebody who hasn't read yet. We're gonna
What
go,
verse?
We're gonna go through 17, 1 through 17. These are the 10 commandments.
You want me to read at 17?
Nope, start with 20, verse 1.
Oh, the very beginning. Okay. You can hear me over my AC? Yes? Cool.
Yes.
The 10 Commandments. And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. And you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
Hopefully those sound somewhat familiar to you. Y'all heard those
Where
before.
does it say don't be gay?
Thank you. And walk off. That's a walk off right there. Okay, so let's look at a couple of these. What's the first commandment?
You'll have no other gods before me.
Okay. And the fourth commandment, I believe, right, is the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Why are we supposed to keep the Sabbath day holy? This one has a why.
Because Jesus rested, or God rested after he made everything.
Yep, because God did, we should. Okay? And what's verse 13?
You shall not murder.
Okay, so, and there is a distinction between killing in general and murder in specific. So some Bibles do render this as thou shalt not kill, which is fairly generalized. It's actually, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, it's the basis of our differentiations in our law regarding murder. So there's murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree, and manslaughter. So manslaughter is not deliberate. You accidentally killed somebody, but because it was like neglect or whatever, even if it was unintentional, it's still manslaughter. You still killed somebody, but it wasn't murder, right? Murder is first degree. You meant to do it. You paid somebody to do it, whatever. It's murder, okay? So, and then it goes on. And then there's not adultery is next. So, John, just to pull all this stuff together, how all of these commandments relate to those readings, adultery is the problem that John the Baptist had with Herod Antipas, who's currently the tetrarch, the ruler of his section of Judea. So Antipas divorced his first wife and married his brother's wife, possibly before she divorced his brother. Okay, so John the Baptist called this out in public, and that's why they had him thrown in prison. That's why Herod had him thrown in prison and eventually beheaded, because of adultery. Okay, so John the Baptist using their own code, right? Okay, do you see that? Am I out there? All right. Now, Jesus is talking about the law of the Sabbath, right? That we should remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy and do no work. I don't know that much about Jewish law. And I guess picking grain is the work that Jesus was doing that they were calling him out on. But they didn't say picking it, they said eating it. And Jesus in reply is speaking to the act of eating food that's set aside for sacred use. So I think Jesus is just generalizing.
Well, there's a little extra part to it as well. So
Okay.
for grain fields, they would specifically keep the grain near the roads,
Mhm.
were for widows and for orphans and those people to pick. And so they kept those away. So you could make the case, it's like that is separate for those types of people.
Right? Right? And bye, Dustin. Thanks for stopping by. So I guess this is my point, is eventually, at the end of this second vignette, the Pharisees now have run off to make a deal with the devil and the people of the Herodians in order to bring Jesus down. Eventually, we know, those of us who've read to the end of the story, that it's the Pharisees who get Jesus killed by saying that he claimed to be a god. Jesus did claim to be a god. He claimed to be the one true God. So they weren't lying about that. However, if he actually is the one true God, it's not blasphemy. It's just the truth. So depending on your interpretation, you could say that the Pharisees committed the crime of murder and upheld the crime of adultery by going in league with the Herodians who want Herod to stay on the throne. And yet the Pharisees are mad at Jesus because they picked some grain on the Sabbath. I feel like I'm muddying the water. But what I'm trying to do is, Sarah's heard this enough times, she's probably sick of it. I call this the wavy line. And everybody reads the Bible, and then they come up with where they draw those lines around what's okay and what's not okay, right? I actually know, as somebody pointed out, I think it was Misha, that male gay sex is always considered wrong, but female gay sex is actually up for grabs, depending on who you talk to. And I have been involved in organizations that would advocate for, we're fine, you guys are screwed. So there's that wavy line, like, oh, gay boys no, gay gals okay. And everybody just draws that line, like no dancing, no alcohol, no drugs, long hair, meh, all right. How long? How short? We just draw those lines around, and I see that's what they were doing in the first century too. They're just drawing these lines around which ones they think okay. And Rachel, I think you pulled it out really nicely when you said this downward moral decline of the Pharisees. You know, what are they doing out walking on the Sabbath? Why aren't they home resting? Are they breaking the Sabbath, you know, by working because they're out chasing Jesus to prove him wrong? Like, isn't that their job as Pharisees? I mean, it's all interpretive, right? Like, where do we draw those lines? Rachel? You look like you have something to say. No. Like, so N.T. Wright, in one of the questions that I posted online, he says, are there ways in which the church today can get so blinded by its commitment to what appear necessary rules that it fails to see God's healing and restorative work breaking through? And I mean, obviously, as we've talked about, like in their attitude toward our community, absolutely. They say they want to save our souls, but they won't even let us in the door.
Just a moment.
Are there any others that you can see?
I was just thinking when you were talking, the Catholic Church is still having discussions about women being priests. Like, talk about leading from the back. Women have been leading in every other forum for years, but they're just now getting around to talking about it because it was the rule. Nobody questioned the rule.
Yeah. And honestly, where would the Catholic Church be? And would they have any religious folk at all? Would they have any religious, like men that desired to be what we call religious priests? Were it not for good Catholic teachers and good Catholic schools? Have not the women consistently been in charge of raising up the next generation of good whatevers? Catholics, Jews, Protestants, evangelicals, all along the way.
Mm-hmm.
They entrusted to us, to the females, the instruction of those generations and then said, but you're not leaders.
Yeah, I led men in combat for 20 years, but can't do that.
The whole flying a plane thing does not qualify you to lead. Sorry.
No. Mm-mm.
I'm also thinking about the way that we see like forgiveness and reconciliation basically used to allow predators to continue harming people with zero accountability. Like especially when you're like a Christian celebrity, you can just, have like dozens of women accuse you of assault and harassment and have those corroborated, and then you just disappear for 6 months and you come back and you say, oh, I've been working on my heart. And everyone like just welcomes you with open arms. And so when people say like, what actually like has he done? Like, what has he done to restore this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're just trying to cancel him. You need to have a heart of forgiveness. But that's not what forgiveness is for. And it's not what it's about. And it's like, yeah, drawing that line in the sand.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, this category, like Sarah can be like a military leader, but that's a different category. That's not the same. And so I think the thing with a lot of these, like, how does the church get so blinded by its commitment to these like things is the church gets blinded because it has the power to put those boxes in place. And if you're able to start challenging its boxes, you are able to start challenging its power.
Yep. And they have
And now you're looking at the man behind the curtain.
But we're talking about, we're talking about organized religion versus the church. The church is us. So, there's a difference to me, and I don't want to look at gray areas and all that. So, organized religion, yes, but we see the same thing happening in the Bible, which should be the church that we are part of, right? It's still organized religion. It's disturbing.
Yeah.
Was, is, and always will be. So.
Yeah, this is a fairly disorganized little Bible study we got going here, basically, based on the personality of its leader. But there has to be some organization. Somebody has to pick a time. Somebody has to turn the thing on. Like if we were still able to eat together, somebody's got to put on the stew. It very quickly becomes a layered tier of organizational lines and. But the institutional church that Kelly's referring to as organized religion and that Rachel's referring to, that is where the power lies. And they They don't want to be challenged. They don't want anybody to take their power. And clearly, I think that was what the Pharisees were also upholding. I mean, if you could do anything you wanted on the Sabbath, and the Sabbath no longer has the meaning that the Pharisees wanted it to have, and if it didn't matter whether or not you went to temple, if it didn't matter whether or not you brought your sacrifices, what were they supposed to do for a living? And where were they going to get all their meat that they ate that came from the temple sacrifices? And where were they going to get the money that people paid them?
You have to tithe to the church, 10%.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. Now, don't get me started on tithing, because I'm a believer in tithing, but I don't think it has to go to a church with an ink at the end of it. So, so yeah, I mean, how much and how often does power play a part in all of these, you know, in upholding the rules? And I like, so I want to move now to a discussion about Sabbath, but I think we don't have to get too far away from discussing what we have been discussing. And, you know, I always like it when we try to bring it home to our lives. Okay, so how do we individually and corporately try to recapture the true spirit of Sabbath in our world? And Janine, here's Janine over here. Janine and I talk about this all the time. We were sort of on permanent Sabbath here at our house because we haven't worked since March. Janine had to go to work an hour and a half every day there for a few months, but honestly, it's kind of hard to remember what day it is, let alone whether or not it's a Sabbath day. And Sarah?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, it's not necessarily working like at a job either. Like, I think what it means to me is what I'm really bad at is forcing myself to be still. I've only started learning how to figure that out in the last like 5 years, but I find all kinds of stuff to do to busy myself and keep my mind from running away, you know, and I'm avoiding feelings and all kinds of things when I'm doing that, and forcing myself to be still and deal with those things is hard, but necessary.
Yep. So a Sabbath from busyness,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
from activity. And he goes on to talk about how the economic forces are frequently more dehumanizing than the abused Sabbath law ever was. I love that. So how do we keep the humanity without, I don't know, tossing all the rules out the window and just saying anything goes? I mean, is it anything goes? Is everything okay? And I mean, it's easy to say, well, I'm not to judge you or your lives, but how do I do that for my own life? Is it anything goes? How do we decide specifically what's Sabbath? How do I keep it?
I mean, I think Kelly said it really well. Like, this is a very gray space. And the Pharisees got tripped up because Jesus asked them binary questions. And I don't think a binary answer is what Jesus is like looking for.
Right.
But I think they were also thinking binary, like that's what they were doing. And so he asked them and put them in a situation where they couldn't choose one or the other. And if they did choose one, then they would agree with him. If they didn't choose anything, that's why he sort of got angry at them, because it's like, you are just being stubborn, you know this is right. And so Sabbath then is something different than this binary thing that they were thinking. I do kind of agree, sort of like with what Sarah and Kelly, was that Sabbath, at least for me, is more of that not busy. It's that stillness, because it's so easy to go find things. Like, even if I'm stuck in a house, my mind is still doing, it's like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. And so it's sort of this way of like, okay, I cannot have a bunch of stress. I can like push these away. I have those planned for some other time. This is Sabbath. This is like the day where you can relax and you're sort of there to do that. And it's not like I'm going to go relax for an hour and then I'm going to go work on all these things for 5 more hours after that. It's like, okay, no, you can take the time to breathe and be calm. And it's also this aspect of, I think one of the reasons the Sabbath is so important is we need that. because in our society today, it is a capitalist society. So you should be trying to get as much as you can for everything you have. And so if you are not producing, then you're taking away from the system. And so it's this idea that we always have to be producing, we always have to be doing something. And you just run yourself ragged that way, where if you stop and take account of yourself and see what's going on and relax, breathe, meditate, whatever it is, but that you are not in this mental space of like the binary of producing or taking away, it's where you can actually start to function more.
That's beautiful.
Well, I mean, we have the secular Sabbath, right? So that's like you need to take time and you need to relax, you need to get away, you need to think, but and be introspective. But I think that God's Sabbath is take time. It doesn't have to be on Sunday, it doesn't have to be on Saturday. Take time, be thoughtful, be introspective, be worshipful, praise me. That's Sabbath to me. That's what it's about. And in that time, you can also bring your secular self into it and give thanks that you are taking time to refresh and re-energize. And if that happens to be Sunday, and I go to Zoom church every Sunday, but then my Sabbath is over after Zoom church because I'm helping produce Zoom church. So then I need to find another time to have my Sabbath, I guess. I don't know.
That's something that clerics of all denominations have a problem with is when do they worship and when is their Sabbath when Sunday is their day of work, not rest. So that comes up a lot, Kelly, for anybody who is a worker in the church.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And I get it now because, yeah.
And Kelly just made my final point for me, so we'll just close early. Actually, I just want us to go back and read Exodus chapter 20, verse 1. It's actually verse 3, but anyway.
Oh. So that you shall have no other gods before me?
Yeah. And those of you who weren't with us when we studied Genesis, if you remember, the reason Abraham was called, we were told, was because Abraham was faithful, but Abraham didn't do anything. Abraham was called faithful because Abraham believed God, but he wasn't doing anything. He hadn't left yet. Then it says, and then he left, which is what God told him to do. But he was called faithful just because he believed God. And one way to interpret that is that Abraham recognized that there was a God, and Abraham wasn't it. And I think that's one interpretation of the first commandment, for us to just be mindful of the fact in our busy capitalist world, in my busy capitalist little house, that I'm not the be all and end all, that there's something above me and even above her, that, that there's a God. And I might think about that sometimes and just reflect on that and sit in that space for a while, which is what Kelly just said. I mean, maybe there's a reason God stated the 10 commandments in that order. I'm not saying they're diminishing in importance so much as they build upon it. So you can't have a Sabbath unless you recognize that there's a God who also took a Sabbath. Right? One of the complaints of some mainstream churchgoers is that the mainstream church, and again, Presbyterian, Unitarian Universalist, some kinds of Methodists, most Lutherans, is that they do a lot of good social work, but they don't have a lot of why underneath it. They just do the work because the work needs to be done, but they forget why. And I think that that's a good Sabbath rest for all of us, is to just be able to sit and remember the basic why of all of the things that we do. Right? Your why might be different than mine, by the way.
Yeah, so then the bottom line with this whole conversation about the Sabbath is
What is Sabbath for you? And how do you keep the Sabbath? What does that mean for you? I don't think there's one way to interpret it. I think there could be many ways. I think for Misha, it was a sense of quietness and setting aside to just exist rather than do, if I am reading Misha's correctly.
Yeah, no, it's that, and then I feel because I grew up in the church so much, reading the Bible or like the quiet times and everything were always a chore. Like you had to do it to be a good person. And so through that, it was never like, oh, this is really good. It's like, did you do your quiet time? Did you do it every day? If you didn't, then it was guilt. And so it's sort of like, yes, I can look at that type of stuff and I can go through and I can read the Bible and I can enjoy it, but I can also not do that. I can just go sit outside and reflect on nature and other things around and be thankful and reflect on myself, what I've been given, all these other things that I can look and tie directly back to God. And it doesn't have to directly come from what was my quiet time.
right. That's great.
When I was a pastor in the Church of the Nazarene, which upholds the tradition of saying grace before meals, and so every church meal ever, you had to pause, somebody find a pastor so that we can bless the food so that we can finally eat. But in my own time, like if I went out to lunch with people, they immediately noticed that I don't bow my head over my Big Mac and say a prayer. I just eat the darn thing. And I got called out on it more than once, but one time the person who called me out was pretty forceful about it. And she was like, I'm really shocked to see that you don't say grace. And I was like, I've been so hungry that church, that particular building, that particular congregation had filled my family's van with food because we could not go to the grocery store. And one person in that church had paid our light bill the day before because we had no money. We had no income for 5 months. I said, I'm thankful for every bite of food I eat ever. I honestly am, because I have had not food. The fact that I don't bow my head and say, Jesus, thank you. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to say grace. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to take a moment, as the Germans do, and say, Guten Essen. They look around, they make eye contact with each other, and then they say, we eat good food, and then they eat. They recognize, they take a moment, they thank the cook, and then they eat the good food.
And I think there's a big difference between being genuine about it, whether it's internal or external and you're making connection, or just making a big freaking show of it. And that annoys me.
Totally annoys me.
I'm just gonna make one snippy comment.
Just one. You're only allowed allowed one.
How often do people make a big show of how we have to thank God for the food without thanking their wife for cooking it?
And don't get me started with the snippy, because I got your snippy right here with the Nazarenes that would go to church after lunch and be rude to the wait staff and then pray over the food. No, thank you. And tip badly.
I would say for me, Sabbath is setting a boundary.
You said the B word.
Setting a boundary. I actually have to have my space to recharge from being around people and being on Zoom calls all week long. And Sabbath is also like setting this boundary that I don't have to earn my right to exist on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
I can just be, like Misha said, I can just exist.
You can be a human being instead of a human doing. It's beautiful. So that's our takeaway from today. Any lingering thoughts?
I have many thoughts, but most of them are about reading the 10 Commandments, because I've been looking at them like, why is this in here? And then, they took this commandment out of context and made it sexist. But,
I sense a blog post.
Well, the you shall not commit adultery, they changed it through it. It's not the fact of women going and having sexual relationship with a man. It's that if a man had sexual relationship with a married woman, and it would treat the women as property, and that's how they translated it. So while the whole concept you shall not commit adultery is a good concept and it is a good rule, they took that rule and twisted it into a property type thing. But that's a different topic.
I think there's a few people in this study that would have something to say about the fact that they took the whole marriage thing and turned it into a property thing. But that, you know, again, that's... Yeah, yeah. Well, I love you guys. I hope you can find some Sabbath time between this Wednesday and next Wednesday. Anybody got anything big going on?
Going camping next Monday to Thursday, but won't be far away, so and I'll be with Mike, so maybe we'll try to dial in.
Okay, cool.
We'll try.
Where are you camping?
Farragut State Park, so it's the very southern end of Pend Oreille, the lake.
Mhm.
I started to say New Jersey, in Idaho. New Jersey used to be the state next to me. Now it's Idaho. Okay, got it. Okay. That's it. And it's hot, hot, hot here. We could challenge you, Misha. It's going to be like 103 and 104 here with no humidity, but
I would happily trade. Like, I would be down with the heat and no humidity. Like, I'm very happy with that.
The day we spent in Selma, Alabama, Janine and I and Misha met up in Selma, Alabama and walked around. Holy God, you're just running. There's no way to not be sweaty. That just doesn't exist. It's just horrid.
Yep.
Your body's in panic mode all the time you're outside, right?
I mean, you get in the shower so you dry off.
Yeah. There's no dry. Rachel?
I will say I'm hoping to be able to come next week, but my plans might change because next Wednesday is my birthday. So 26. And
Old lady, wow.
I know. I might get stuck on some phone calls, so we shall see.
Yeah. And Sarah, you're going to be out of town?
Yeah, I'm gonna be going home on Wednesday because my mom's having surgery. So I'll probably just be getting there when Bible study happens. So I won't make it, but
I'll try.
I might try.
I'll have my kids, but we'll see what I can do.
Cool. All right. Well, we always
Right,
try and do our best. Summer is tough, as Kelly's pointed out. It's tough to get people together, but we plow through. And one of these days, we're going to be able to actually meet in person again. I'm somewhat hopeful.
I have to fly Misha in for a reunion too.
Yeah.
Well, if you plan it in December, I should be there sometime in December. So that should give enough time to
Cool.
figure something out.
That might be the next time we're actually able to be in person.
I know, right? It's about the same. So
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
Well, y'all can be
No.
praying for me. I actually applied for a job at the school district. So none of us knows what that means. One day we're getting emails from the head of the teachers union in the state saying you all should apply for unemployment. And 2 days later, they post 3 new paraeducator jobs. So we have no idea what in the world's going on, but I have applied for a regular full-time job at the school district, which I sort of desperately need, both for income and for not paying back my student loans. So please pray that, I don't even know, honestly, like, I don't think we should be meeting. I don't think we should be in school. I don't think kids should go back to school. But I need a job real bad, so there you go.
Need a job, right? Yeah.
No idea what to pray for.
Wear your mask. Say a prayer and wear your mask and
Right.
keep going.
All right. Okay, y'all. Love ya.
Bye, everybody.
bye.
See ya.